My boyfriend laughed. "You're so unattractive, I'd never have to worry about you cheating." I smiled and said, "That's reassuring." 6 months later, he was demanding I quit the gym because too many men were looking at me. My name is Claire Bennett. I'm 27 years old, and if you'd asked me a year ago whether one careless joke could destroy an entire relationship, I probably would have laughed and said no. Now I know better. The strange thing is that Ryan never thought of it as cruelty. Even after everything that happened, even after we broke up, even after months of arguments and fallout, he still called it a joke. To him, it was just a joke, the kind of comment people throw out at parties and forget about before the night is even over. The problem was that I couldn't forget it. That's what made it worse, because the people who hurt you the most are rarely the ones who think they're hurting you. The night it happened felt completely ordinary. Ryan and I were at a coworker's birthday party. Nothing fancy. A crowded apartment, cheap drinks, music that was a little too loud, and the usual mix of coworkers, friends, and strangers pretending they all knew each other. I remember feeling comfortable that night, the kind of comfort that comes from being with someone for years and believing you know exactly who they are. I wasn't dressed up. I wasn't trying to impress anybody. Ryan and I had already settled into that stage of a relationship where sweatpants and takeout felt more natural than date nights and effort. At the time, I thought that was a good thing. Looking back, I think I had slowly stopped seeing myself. One of Ryan's coworkers pointed across the room at a woman openly flirting with a guy she'd met less than 10 minutes earlier. The group laughed. Someone made a joke about how quickly people moved on these days. Ryan glanced at me. Then he smiled. It's funny how your brain remembers certain moments with perfect clarity. I can't remember what song was playing. I can't remember what I was drinking. But I remember that smile. Because now I know what came after it. At least I never have to worry about that with Claire. A few people laughed. I looked at him. What do you mean? Ryan wrapped an arm around my shoulders. Come on. No, seriously. He laughed again. Then he said it. Honestly, you're so unattractive that I'll never have to worry about you cheating on me. The room exploded. People laughed immediately. Some laughed because they thought it was funny. Others laughed because everyone else was laughing. A couple people looked uncomfortable. Nobody said anything. Nobody stopped him. Nobody told him he'd gone too far. Ryan kept smiling. As terrible as that sounds, it's actually kind of a compliment. I felt heat rushing into my face. A compliment? Yeah. He shrugged. It means I feel secure. More laughter. I forced a smile because I didn't know what else to do. That's reassuring. There you go. He kissed the side of my head and immediately turned back to the conversation. As far as he was concerned, the moment was over. For me, it wasn't. The ride home was quiet. Ryan didn't notice. He was scrolling through his phone and talking about something that happened at work. I answered when I needed to, nodded when I needed to, pretended everything was fine. Then we got home. Ryan fell asleep within 15 minutes. I stayed awake until nearly 3 in the morning. At some point, I ended up standing in front of the bathroom mirror. I wasn't crying, and I wasn't even angry yet. I was just standing there, staring at my reflection, trying to figure out why his words hurt so much. The hardest part was that Ryan hadn't completely invented the insecurity. Over the previous few years, I had gained weight. A lot of it. Work got stressful. Life became repetitive. Exercise disappeared. Takeout became normal. I started buying clothes based on comfort instead of confidence. Somewhere along the way, I stopped putting effort into myself. I didn't notice it happening at first. Most people don't. Change usually arrives one small compromise at a time. One skipped workout. One lazy weekend. One stressful month. Then one day you look in the mirror and realize you've become someone you barely recognize. Still, hearing it out loud hit differently, especially in front of a room full of people, especially from the person who was supposed to love you. I kept replaying the moment, not because of the insult itself, because of how easily it came out of his mouth. The confidence, the certainty, the assumption that everyone would agree. That part hurt more than the words. Around 3 in the morning, I made a decision. I didn't make it to prove Ryan wrong. At least that's what I told myself. I made it because I was tired. Tired of feeling uncomfortable in my own skin. Tired of avoiding cameras. Tired of pulling at my clothes whenever I sat down. Tired of looking away from mirrors. The next morning, I joined a gym before work. That afternoon, I downloaded a nutrition app. A week later, I booked an appointment with an actual stylist instead of cutting my own hair every few months whenever I got annoyed enough. The changes were small. Nothing dramatic. Nothing Instagram-worthy. Just consistent. When I told Ryan, he barely looked up from his phone. You're joining a gym? Yeah. Why? I laughed. Because I want to get healthier. Oh, that was his entire reaction. No encouragement. No excitement. No support. Just a casual shrug before returning to whatever he was reading. At the time, I didn't think much about it. Now I realize that indifference was the first warning sign. People who genuinely want the best for you usually get excited when you start taking care of yourself. Ryan wasn't excited. He was uninterested. At least in the beginning. The first month was hard. The second month was harder. Every muscle hurt. The scale barely moved. Some mornings I wanted to quit. Some evenings I sat in my car outside the gym arguing with myself. Go home. Number. Just 30 minutes. You can leave after 30 minutes. Most days, once I walked through the door, I stayed. Slowly things changed. Not overnight. Not in some dramatic movie montage. Just little things. My clothes fit differently. My energy improved. My sleep got better. I stopped feeling exhausted every afternoon. For the first time in years, I felt proud of myself. Not because I looked different, because I was actually following through on something. A few months later, I came home carrying shopping bags. Ryan glanced up from the couch. What did you buy? Clothes. He looked me over, then looked back at the bags. Huh, that was it. One word. But something about it felt strange. Like he was noticing the changes for the first time. Like he wasn't sure whether he liked them. Then, a few days later, I posted a picture online. Nothing special. Just me standing outside a coffee shop after work. The comments started rolling in throughout the day. Most were completely normal. Friends. Coworkers. People I'd known for years. One comment stood out because it was from a guy at work named Daniel. You look amazing, Claire. Whatever you're doing, keep it up. I smiled when I read it, then forgot about it. Ryan didn't. That night we were watching television when he casually asked, Who's Daniel? I looked over. What? The guy commenting on your picture. Oh, coworker. Ryan nodded slowly. The one who said you look amazing. I laughed. People say nice things sometimes. Right. The conversation ended there. Or at least I thought it did. Over the next few weeks, I started noticing subtle changes. Nothing obvious enough to point at. Nothing dramatic enough to start a fight over. Just little things. At first, it was just small things. Questions about who I talked to, comments about my social media, little observations that seemed harmless on their own. Every time a man interacted with me, Ryan seemed to remember. Every time somebody complimented me, he somehow knew about it later. At first, I brushed it off. Maybe I would have kept brushing it off if the attention had stayed online. But it didn't. The more weight I lost, the more confident I became. The more confident I became, the more people noticed. Not in some unrealistic movie star way, just normal human interaction. A coworker complimented my haircut. A man held a door open and smiled. A barista remembered my name. One afternoon, a guy from another department stopped me near the elevators. Claire? I turned around. He blinked, then laughed. Sorry, I almost didn't recognize you. I laughed too. Hopefully that's a good thing. It definitely is. The conversation lasted less than 2 minutes. By the time I got home, I'd forgotten about it. Ryan hadn't. That night, he asked why another man had been talking to me at work. I stared at him. How do you even know about that? You mentioned seeing him. I said hello to someone. Why? I honestly thought he was joking. Ryan wasn't joking. You know guys don't randomly start conversations unless they're interested, right? I sat there staring at him. Ryan, we work in the same building. I'm just saying. That phrase started showing up a lot. I'm just saying. Maybe he likes you. I'm just saying. Maybe he's flirting. I'm just saying. Maybe you're enjoying the attention. The words always came wrapped in casual humor. But after a while, the pattern became impossible to ignore. The weirdest part was that none of this had ever bothered him before. Back when I wore oversized sweaters. Back when I avoided photographs. Back when I felt lucky that someone like Ryan wanted me at all. Male attention had never been a concern then. Now it seemed to bother him constantly. At first, I didn't understand why. I told myself he was being protective. I told myself he was feeling insecure. I told myself it would pass. Then one night, while we were having dinner, Ryan asked a question that changed the way I looked at everything. He set down his fork and said, Can I ask you something? Sure. If a guy asked you out tomorrow, what would you do? I laughed. I have a boyfriend. That's not what I asked. The smile faded from my face. Why are we talking about this? Just answer. I leaned back in my chair. I'd say no. Ryan nodded. For a second, I thought that would be the end of it. Then he looked directly at me. But would you be tempted? I didn't answer right away. Not because I was considering it, because I was trying to understand why he was asking. And somewhere in that silence, I saw something in Ryan that I'd never seen before. For the first time, I saw genuine fear in his face. Not the fear of being cheated on, but the fear of losing certainty. Fear that I might eventually realize I had a choice. And once that thought entered my head, I couldn't get rid of it. That question stayed with me long after dinner ended. Not because I couldn't answer it, Because I understood what Ryan was really asking. He wasn't asking whether I'd cheat. He knew I wouldn't. We'd been together for years. I'd never given him a reason to doubt me. I couldn't explain it at the time, but something about that conversation stayed with me. It felt less like a question about trust, and more like Ryan was searching for reassurance he couldn't quite ask for directly. At the time, I couldn't put that feeling into words. I just knew something felt off. Over the next several weeks, Ryan's behavior became harder to ignore. The changes weren't dramatic at first. They were subtle, small enough that if I complained about them individually, I'd sound ridiculous. It started with the occasional comment or question. Then there were suspicious looks, sarcastic remarks, and little moments that felt harmless on their own, but became harder to ignore once they started piling up. One evening, I posted a workout progress picture online. Nothing flashy, no posing, just me standing outside the gym after finishing a workout I was genuinely proud of. The response surprised me. People were encouraging. Friends commented, coworkers commented. A few old classmates reached out. One guy I'd known in college sent a message. "Claire, is that really you? You look incredible." I laughed and showed the message to a coworker while we were grabbing coffee. She laughed too. That was the entire interaction. By the time I got home, I'd forgotten about it. Ryan hadn't. The notification popped up while I was making dinner. He glanced at my phone, then picked it up. "Who's this?" I looked over my shoulder. "Oh, someone from college?" He stared at the message longer than necessary. "What does he mean by incredible?" I actually laughed. "What?" "He called you incredible." "Because he's being nice." Ryan set the phone down. Seems like more than nice. I turned off the stove and looked at him. "Ryan, do you hear yourself? I'm asking a question." "No, you're looking for a problem." The conversation turned into an argument almost immediately. Not a screaming match. The kind of fight that's somehow worse. Quiet. Tense. Every sentence loaded with things neither person is saying directly. Ryan insisted he was just looking out for our relationship. I insisted he was making something out of nothing. Neither of us said the thing both of us were thinking. Something had changed, and we both knew it. A week later, another message arrived. This one was from a man named Nathan. We weren't close. We had mutual friends. We'd met at a barbecue months earlier. The message was simple. "Hey, Claire, congratulations on your progress. Would you want to grab coffee sometime?" I stared at the screen for a minute. Then I did what felt like the responsible thing. I showed Ryan. Immediately. No hiding. No secrecy. No games. I walked into the living room and handed him my phone. "Hey, your opinion?" Ryan read the message. His jaw tightened. "What did you tell him?" "Nothing yet." "Tell him no." "I was planning to. Right now." The tone surprised me. Not because he wanted me to decline. That part was reasonable. It was how quickly the request became an order. I typed a polite response. "Sorry, I'm in a relationship, but thank you." Then I showed him. There. Ryan read it. Then handed the phone back. "Block him." I blinked. "What?" "Block him. He hasn't done anything wrong. He asked my girlfriend out. He didn't know I had a boyfriend." "I don't care." The conversation spiraled from there. By the end of it, I blocked Nathan. Not because I agreed with Ryan. Because I was exhausted. At the time, I thought I was keeping the peace. Looking back, I was teaching him something dangerous. I was teaching him that pressure worked. And once someone learns that, they usually push further. That's exactly what happened. The next time a man commented on my photo, Ryan wanted him blocked. Then another. Blocked. Then another. Blocked. Eventually, the list became ridiculous. A coworker. An old classmate. A friend of a friend. Someone who liked a picture without even messaging me. Ryan seemed to have developed a sixth sense for finding men who existed anywhere near my social media. One night I walked into the living room and found him scrolling through my followers. Actually scrolling. Checking profiles. Looking through comments. I stared at him. "What are you doing?" He looked up without even seeming embarrassed. "Just looking." "Looking at what?" "These guys." I sat down across from him. "Ryan." "What?" "This is weird." His expression changed instantly. Defensive. "I'm trying to protect our relationship." "From what?" He didn't answer. Because there wasn't a good answer. There was only the answer he didn't want to say out loud. Around that same time, I started noticing another pattern. Every time I reached some kind of fitness milestone, Ryan suddenly found a reason to celebrate with food. Whether it was pizza, cheesecake, burgers, or takeout from my favorite restaurants, the timing never felt accidental. One night I came home after a particularly good week. I'd broken through a plateau that had frustrated me for nearly a month. Ryan greeted me with a huge smile. "I made your favorite." The kitchen smelled incredible. For a second, the old version of me wanted to forget everything and sit down. Instead, I smiled. "It looks amazing." His face brightened. Then I added, but I already meal prepped dinner. The disappointment was immediate. You already ate? I brought food to work. Ryan stared at me, then laughed. Not a happy laugh. One of those laughs people use when they're annoyed. So now you're one of those people. What people? The people who carry food containers everywhere. I shook my head. I'm literally eating chicken and vegetables. I'm just saying you've changed. There it was again. That phrase. I'm just saying. It became Ryan's favorite hiding place. Anything harsh could be tucked behind it. Anything unfair could be disguised as concern. The more he used it, the less convincing it became. Then the timing of our arguments started feeling suspicious. At first, I didn't notice. Most people don't notice patterns until they happen enough times. Every argument seemed to begin right before I left for the gym. Never 2 hours before. Never after I got home. Always right before. Sometimes it was the dishes. Other times it was a bill, a forgotten errand, or something I'd supposedly said weeks earlier. The excuse changed, but the timing never did. One Tuesday evening, I grabbed my gym bag and headed for the door. Ryan stopped me. We need to talk. Can it wait until I get back? His face immediately hardened. There it is. I sighed. There what is? The gym is more important. It's an hour. You always say that. Because it's true. Ryan shook his head. You don't get it. I looked at him. No, I don't. The thing was, Ryan spent entire weekends golfing. He stayed out with friends. He played video games for hours. None of those things ever threatened our relationship. But somehow my 4 gym sessions each week had become a crisis. The more he complained, the clearer it became that the gym wasn't actually the problem. It represented something else, something neither of us wanted to name yet. One night, after another pointless argument, I finally lost patience. Ryan was sitting on the couch, scrolling through my Instagram followers again. I stood in the doorway watching him for several seconds. Then I asked, "Can I point something out?" He glanced up. What? You spent years acting like no man would ever be interested in me. His face tightened instantly. That's not what I said. It is. It was a joke. I laughed. The sound came out sharper than I intended. Funny how it stopped being funny. Ryan looked away. I kept going. When you thought nobody would pay attention to me, it wasn't a problem. Claire, but now suddenly every comment is suspicious. That's different. How? He opened his mouth, then closed it. Because there wasn't a logical explanation, only an emotional one. And I don't think he was ready to admit it yet. The breaking point arrived 2 weeks later. I had just finished a workout and was drinking water at the kitchen counter when Ryan sat across from me. The second I saw his expression, I knew something was coming. He looked too calm, like he'd rehearsed the conversation beforehand. I've been thinking. A cold feeling settled into my stomach. Whenever someone starts a sentence that way, the rest is rarely good news. About what? Us. I set down my bottle. Okay. Ryan folded his hands together. I think this gym thing has gotten out of control. I stared at him. For a second, I honestly thought he was joking. Then I realized he wasn't. What exactly is out of control? You're obsessed. I almost laughed. I work out 4 hours a week. You think that's normal? Yes. Ryan leaned forward. His voice dropped. The gym is changing you. The conversation suddenly felt much bigger than exercise. What's wrong with changing? His answer came so quickly it sounded rehearsed. I don't like who you're becoming. I sat very still. What does that mean? Ryan exhaled, then finally said what he'd been building toward for months. If this relationship matters to you, you'll stop going. I genuinely thought I'd misheard him. Stop going where? The gym. You want me to stop exercising? Yes. In that moment, months of strange behavior suddenly lined up in my head. The food, the jealousy, the arguments, the constant monitoring, all of it pointing toward the same problem. Everything clicked into place at once. This had never been about fitness. It had never been about trust. And it definitely wasn't about coffee invitations or Instagram comments. For the first time, I realized this argument had very little to do with the gym itself. It was about the fact that I was changing, and Ryan didn't seem to know how to handle that, without trying to keep the peace, without worrying about how he'd react. I looked him directly in the eye. No, the color drained from his face, and neither of us knew it yet, but that single word had just changed the direction of our entire future. The second I said no, Ryan looked at me like I'd spoken a language he didn't understand. Not angry, not immediately, just genuinely stunned. For months, maybe longer, he'd been operating under the assumption that eventually I'd give in. Maybe we'd argue. Maybe I'd cry. Maybe I'd push back for a while. But in the end, I'd do what I'd always done. I'd compromise. I'd smooth things over. I'd choose the relationship over myself. This time I didn't. Ryan leaned back in his chair. So that's it? I frowned. What do you mean? You're choosing the gym. I almost laughed. Not because it was funny. Because it was absurd. The conversation had somehow gone from me wanting to be healthy to me abandoning the relationship. No, Ryan. I shook my head. I'm choosing myself. The silence that followed wasn't dramatic. It was uncomfortable. The kind of silence that settles in when two people suddenly realize they're no longer standing on the same side of a problem. Over the next few days, things got tense. We weren't screaming at each other. Honestly, I almost wished we were. At least yelling would have felt honest. Instead, Ryan became cold. Short answers. Forced smiles. Passive-aggressive comments. Whenever I left for the gym, he'd toss out little remarks. Have fun. Or, try not to get too popular. Or, don't let all the attention go to your head. Every comment was small enough to deny. Small enough that if I reacted, I'd sound oversensitive. But after hearing them day after day, they started piling up. The strange thing was that part of me still wanted to fix things. I wasn't looking for a breakup. I wasn't secretly planning an escape. I still loved him. Or at least I loved the version of him I'd spent years believing in. One evening, after nearly a week of barely speaking, I finally asked the question we'd both been avoiding. Are we going to talk about this? Ryan looked up from his phone. Talk about what? The fact that you've been angry for days. I'm not angry. I stared at him. You barely speak to me. I'm giving you space. That answer would have been funny if the situation wasn't so exhausting. Giving someone space doesn't usually involve making them feel guilty every time they walk into a room. I sat across from him. Ryan, just be honest. He looked away. For a few seconds, neither of us said anything. Then he surprised me. I'm scared. The admission caught me completely off guard. Not because I didn't know he was scared. Because it was the first honest thing he'd said in months. Scared of what? Ryan rubbed his face. Everything. I waited. Eventually, he continued. You're different now. People change. Not like this. I didn't interrupt. I wanted to hear what he'd say if nobody stopped him. Ryan stared at the floor. You used to look at me differently. That sentence sat between us. And the more I thought about it, the more uncomfortable it made me. Because he wasn't talking about love. He was talking about certainty. About predictability. About knowing exactly where he stood. Or maybe knowing exactly where I stood. I'm still here, I said quietly. Are you? The question lingered. Then Ryan added something that hurt more than I expected. I feel like you're slipping away. Part of me understood what he meant. The healthier I became, the more confident I became. The more confident I became, the less willing I was to accept things I'd ignored before. But that's not the same thing as leaving someone. Unfortunately, Ryan couldn't seem to see the difference. The next morning, his mother called. The second I saw her name on my phone, I knew the conversation wouldn't be random. We exchanged polite greetings. Then she got straight to the point. Ryan says you two have been struggling lately. I closed my eyes. Of course he did. We've had some disagreements. Relationships go through phases. I waited. She hesitated. Then came the real reason for the call. Maybe you could ease up a little. Ease up on what? The gym. I actually laughed. Not because it was funny, because I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Ryan had apparently gone to his mother and convinced her that my 4 weekly workouts were threatening our relationship. She kept talking. He feels abandoned. I stared out the kitchen window. Abandoned. I worked full-time, paid half the bills, came home every night, spent most weekends with him, but somehow 4 hours of exercise each week qualified as abandonment. Then she accidentally said the thing neither Ryan nor I had said out loud. He says men are paying attention to you now. There it was. The actual issue. Not time, not communication, not the relationship. Attention. That one sentence explained months of behavior. I ended the call politely, but afterward I sat at the kitchen table for nearly 20 minutes. Thinking, replaying everything. The party, the joke, the comments, the blocked contacts, the arguments, the pressure, the jealousy. The pieces finally fit together. When Ryan got home that evening, I was waiting. Why did your mother call me? The guilt crossed his face so quickly he couldn't hide it. She was worried. No. I shook my head. She was worried because of what you told her. Ryan immediately got defensive. I was venting. You were recruiting. His eyes narrowed. What does that mean? It means you wanted somebody else to pressure me because you couldn't. That conversation ended exactly like every argument before it. No accountability. No solution. Just more distance. A few mornings later, I woke up early for the gym. I walked into the living room and immediately noticed something was missing. My gym bag. I checked the couch, the hallway, the kitchen. Nothing. At first, I assumed I'd moved it somewhere. Then I remembered setting it beside the couch the night before. Exactly where I always left it. A bad feeling settled into my stomach. I searched the apartment again. Still nothing. Then I walked downstairs and found it in the dumpster. My gym bag, my headphones, my water bottle, my workout journal, everything thrown away. I just stood there staring. What shocked me wasn't finding it. What shocked me was realizing I wasn't surprised. Deep down, I already knew. I carried everything back upstairs. Ryan was making coffee. The apartment smelled completely normal, which somehow made the situation feel even stranger. I dropped the bag onto the floor. He turned around. His eyes flickered toward it, then back to me. What happened? I couldn't believe he actually asked. Why was my gym bag in the dumpster? Ryan shrugged. A simple shrug, like we were discussing the weather. I don't know. The lie came so easily that it almost impressed me. I gave him every opportunity to tell the truth, every opportunity to apologize, every opportunity to stop digging. Instead, he kept going. Maybe somebody moved it. The dumpster was 3 floors down, behind a locked gate. Neither of us believed that explanation. And that was the moment the relationship ended. Not because of the bag, not because of the gym, because trust dies when somebody lies directly to your face about something both of you know happened. A strange calm came over me. The argument I'd expected never arrived. The anger wasn't there anymore. I was simply done. I'm moving out. Ryan froze. What? I'm done. His expression shifted from confusion to panic. You're leaving me over a gym bag? The fact that he still thought the bag was the issue told me everything. No. I picked up the strap. I'm leaving because you threw away my belongings. I didn't. Because you lied. I didn't. Because every time something makes you uncomfortable, you try to control it instead of dealing with it. That hit a nerve. I could see it immediately. The next hour was messy. The next hour blurred together into boxes, arguments, promises, apologies, and desperate attempts to convince me to stay. Every strategy imaginable. Ryan cycled through all of them. We can fix this. No response. You're overreacting. No response. We've been together for years. Still nothing. Then came the panic. Real panic. The kind that appears when somebody realizes the outcome is no longer negotiable. As I carried the last box toward the door, Ryan said quietly, "Please don't leave." For a split second, my heart broke. Not because I wanted to stay, because I realized how badly I'd wanted this relationship to work, how much time I'd invested, how many excuses I'd made, how many chances I'd given. Then Ryan made one final mistake, one final comment that erased every ounce of doubt. Good luck finding somebody better? I stopped, turned around, and there he was, the same man who'd spent months begging me to stay. Still trying to make me feel smaller on the way out. Still trying to plant doubt. Still trying to make sure I questioned my worth. That's when I knew leaving was the right decision. I walked out, and this time I didn't look back. The breakup should have been the end. Instead, it was the beginning of an entirely different nightmare. The messages started almost immediately. First came apologies, then guilt, then anger, then bargaining, then more apologies. Ryan cycled through every emotion imaginable. When I stopped responding, he started calling from different numbers. When I blocked those, he moved to email. When I ignored that, mutual friends started hearing from him. Then came the rumors. According to Ryan, I'd become obsessed with my appearance. According to Ryan, I'd stopped caring about the relationship. According to Ryan, I was controlling, manipulative, selfish. The stories changed depending on who he was talking to. Unfortunately for him, people remembered what actually happened. They remembered the joke. They remembered the comments. They remembered the way he'd treated me. The more he talked, the worse he looked. Then he crossed another line. A month after the breakup, my gym manager asked to speak with me. Someone had filed a complaint. Apparently, Ryan claimed I was harassing him through people connected to the gym and making him uncomfortable whenever our paths crossed. The problem was that our paths almost never crossed in the first place because Ryan didn't even work out there. The manager looked exhausted by the time I finished explaining everything. A few weeks later, I hired an attorney and sent a formal cease and desist letter. The contact slowed down almost immediately. Not completely, but enough. Enough for me to finally breathe. Enough for life to move forward again. The following months ended up being some of the happiest I'd had in years. I kept going to the gym, kept focusing on work, eventually got promoted, then got a raise, then moved into my own apartment. Somewhere along the way, I stopped waking up anxious, stopped expecting conflict, stopped feeling guilty for taking care of myself. Around that same time, I met Ethan. I took things slowly, very slowly. Not because of Ethan, because of what I'd learned. The first time I mentioned the gym, he smiled and said, "That's awesome." That was it. No suspicion, no interrogation, no insecurity, just support. The simplicity of that moment hit me harder than I expected. Months later, Ethan and I attended a mutual friend's wedding. We were dancing when I noticed someone staring. I turned around. Ryan. I hadn't seen him since the breakup. Not once. His eyes moved from me to Ethan and back again. The expression on his face wasn't anger. It wasn't jealousy either. It looked more like someone realizing a chapter had closed without him. Ethan leaned over. Is that your ex? Yeah. He glanced over, then shrugged. Okay. And that was that. No drama. No competition. No possessiveness. Just confidence. Healthy confidence. Later that night, as Ethan and I were leaving, we walked past Ryan's table. For a second, it looked like he wanted to say something. Maybe an apology. Maybe an explanation. Maybe one last attempt to change how the story ended. I never found out. I kept walking. By then, there wasn't anything left to discuss. Looking back now, none of the things I obsessed over at the time seemed nearly as important as I thought they were. What I remember is standing at that party and hearing someone I loved make me feel small in front of a room full of people. What stayed with me wasn't the weight loss, or even the breakup. It was realizing how much energy I'd spent trying to make myself smaller so someone else could feel comfortable. As Ethan and I walked out of the reception, I glanced back one last time. Ryan was still sitting at the same table, surrounded by people, but somehow looking completely alone. A year earlier, that sight would have broken my heart. Instead, I squeezed Ethan's hand and kept walking. For the first time in a very long time, I wasn't wondering whether I was enough. I already knew.